I used to believe that silence was peaceful, that after a long day of work, walking into a quiet home meant comfort, stability. But that night, the silence wasn't peaceful, it was suffocating. I stepped into the house, expecting the usual sounds, the faint hum of the dishwasher, the muffled dialogue from whatever show Lynette was binge-watching, maybe even the sound of her humming while scrolling through her phone. Instead, I was met with nothing. It wasn't just quiet. It was wrong. I set my keys on the counter and glanced around. The lights were dim. The air felt heavier than usual. That's when I noticed something strange. The dining table was set for one. A single plate, a half-empty wine glass, and an untouched meal. My stomach tightened. "Lynette," I called out, my voice breaking the eerie stillness. No answer. I walked further in, my heartbeat picking up. The master bedroom door was slightly ajar, a sliver of light leaking through. I pushed it open, and there she was, sitting on the edge of the bed, fully dressed, but looking as if she had just been through a war in her own head. "I didn't think you'd be home this early," she said softly, gripping her phone so tight her knuckles turned white. Something inside me whispered that whatever she was about to say would change everything. "What's going on?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. She inhaled sharply, like she needed to brace herself. Then, with an unnerving calmness, she said, "We need to finalize our divorce by Friday, so we can both move on." I blinked, certain I had misheard her. "What?" The way she looked at me, emotionless, prepared, told me she wasn't joking. And just like that, my entire world started to collapse. I stood there, frozen, staring at Lynette like she had just spoken in a language I didn't understand. My brain refused to process her words. Divorce? By Friday? Just like that? It didn't make sense. "You're kidding," I finally managed to say, but there was no humor in my voice. She shook her head, her lips pressed into a thin line. "No, I'm not." A cold wave crashed over me, leaving behind a numbing sensation. I took a step closer, searching her face for something, regret, hesitation, a flicker of emotion, but she was eerily calm. Too calm. Like this was just another item on her to-do list. "Why are you saying this now?" My voice was quieter than I intended, but the storm inside me was building. Lynette exhaled sharply, as if she had been rehearsing for this moment. "Because it's time, and I don't want to drag it out. I think it's better this way, for both of us." I let out a hollow laugh. "Better? You ambush me with divorce papers like you're canceling dinner plans, and you think that's better?" She didn't react, just kept staring at me with that unnervingly blank expression. I ran a hand through my hair, pacing the room. "So that's it. 10 years, gone just like that? No discussion? No warning?" She let out a slow breath. "This is the discussion." I stopped pacing, my hands clenched into fists. "Who is he?" For the first time, something shifted in her face. A flicker of panic, maybe, a slight tension in her jaw, but it was there, and it told me everything I needed to know. I felt my heart hammering against my ribs. "You've met someone." Silence. She swallowed hard, but didn't deny it. And that was all the confirmation I needed. I closed my eyes for a second, forcing air into my lungs. When I spoke again, my voice was steadier, colder. "How long?" Lynette set her phone down and rubbed her temples. "Does it matter?" I let out a bitter chuckle. "Oh, it matters." She sighed, avoiding my gaze. "A few months." I nodded slowly, letting the words sink in. The timeline ran through my head like a crime scene reconstruction. All the late nights, the sudden new interest in going out with friends, the way she had slowly started pulling away from me. It had all been leading to this. "So, you've been lying to me for months," I said, more to myself than to her. She frowned. "I didn't mean for it to happen. Spare me." I cut her off, my patience snapping. "You didn't accidentally fall into another man's arms. You chose this. And now you want me to just sign some papers and move on like none of this ever happened?" She finally looked at me, and for the first time, I saw something close to guilt in her eyes. But it wasn't enough. "I never wanted to hurt you," she said quietly. I laughed, shaking my head. "That's funny. Because you did." She pressed her lips together and looked away. I took a deep breath, trying to ground myself. My entire body felt like it was vibrating with anger, betrayal, disbelief. But one thing was clear. This wasn't just some impulsive decision. She had been planning this for months, maybe even longer. And that realization burned. After a long silence, I finally spoke. "So what now? You expect me to just pack my things and be out by Friday?" She hesitated. No, I'll leave. That threw me off. I had assumed she would expect me to be the one to go. You're leaving? I asked, narrowing my eyes. She nodded. I've already made arrangements. I exhaled sharply, my jaw tightening. Of course, she had. Everything about this was too neat, too planned. She wasn't just dropping this on me, she was executing a well-thought-out exit strategy. Something inside me snapped. I turned away from her, walking toward the nightstand. I opened the drawer and pulled out a pen. Then, with slow, deliberate movements, I grabbed the stack of papers she had placed on the bed. I flipped through them, scanning the pages. And then, in the calmest voice I could muster, I said, "Fine." Her breath hitched slightly. Maybe she hadn't expected me to agree so easily. Maybe she thought I would beg, fight, or scream. But I wouldn't give her that satisfaction. I clicked the pen open. But let's make one thing clear, Lynette, by Friday you'll get exactly what you're asking for. I could see the moment she realized I wasn't just talking about a divorce. She had no idea what was coming next. I sat on the edge of the bed, the weight of the papers in my hands feeling heavier than they should have. I had been expecting a betrayal, but not like this, not so cold, not so calculated. My wife, the woman I had shared 10 years of my life with, had been planning her exit like a business transaction, and I was supposed to just accept it. Lynette sat across from me, her fingers gripping the edge of the comforter. She was tense, waiting for my next move. The air in the room had shifted. It wasn't just about the divorce anymore. It was about the months, maybe years, of deception that had led up to this moment. You've been planning this, I said finally, my voice eerily calm. Haven't you? She hesitated. It's not like that. I let out a dry chuckle, shaking my head. Not like that? You expect me to believe this is some spur-of-the-moment decision? That you just woke up today and thought, hey, maybe I should drop my entire marriage on the floor and walk away? She sighed, looking down at her lap. It's been complicated. I clenched my jaw. That was the worst part, the way she was trying to soften the blow, like I was too fragile to handle the truth. I wasn't fragile. I just hated being treated like an idiot. I tapped the papers against my palm, my mind racing. The pieces of the puzzle were falling into place now. The last-minute plans she made without me. The way she had started keeping her phone face down on the table. The shift in how she spoke to me, not unhappy, but distant, like she was already preparing to be somewhere else. Does he know? I asked suddenly. Lynette's head snapped up. What? You're, whoever he is. Does he know you're married? A flicker of something crossed her face, guilt, maybe? It was gone as quickly as it appeared. She swallowed hard. Yes. I nodded, my grip tightening on the pen in my hand. Of course he does. Makes sense. You weren't just planning an exit, were you? You were setting up a replacement. Her breath hitched. That's not it. Spare me, I cut her off. I don't need the speech, Lynette. You don't get to play the victim here. You had options. You could have been honest. Instead, you lied to my face for months, maybe longer. She closed her eyes for a second, exhaling through her nose. I never wanted it to happen like this. I laughed bitterly. Oh, well, that makes me feel so much better. Silence. I stared at her, and for the first time, I wondered who I had really been married to all these years. Because the woman in front of me, the one who had meticulously planned her escape, who had taken another man into her life while pretending to be my wife, wasn't the same person I had promised to love forever. I tapped the papers again, then flipped to the last page. You already signed these. She nodded. I smirked. Of course you did. You weren't going to give me the chance to talk you out of it. That's why you wanted it done by Friday, isn't it? Because by then, you'll be gone. Another flicker of hesitation. Another confirmation. I stood up, pacing to the window. Outside, the streetlights flickered, casting long shadows on the pavement. Everything outside looked normal, like my world hadn't just collapsed inside this room. I turned back to her. So, where are you going? She stiffened slightly. That doesn't matter. I tilted my head, amused. Oh, but it does. Because I know you, Lynette. You're not the type to do something without a backup plan. So tell me, are you moving in with him? A long pause. Then quietly, yes. And just like that, the last shred of doubt disappeared. I clenched my jaw, exhaling through my nose. I should have been furious. I should have been yelling, throwing things, demanding explanations. But all I felt was exhaustion. A deep, bone-weary exhaustion that settled into my chest like lead. She was already gone. Even before she told me the truth, she had left our marriage a long time ago. I set the papers down on the nightstand, picking up my phone instead. She watched me, wary. "What are you doing?" she asked. I looked at her, unblinking. "Making sure you get exactly what you asked for." Her face paled slightly, but she said nothing. She had made her choice. Now, it was my turn. I didn't sign the papers that night. Instead, I left them on the nightstand, untouched, while Lynette sat there in silence, probably wondering what my next move would be. I wasn't going to give her the satisfaction of an easy exit. Not yet. The truth was, I wasn't ready. Not because I still had hope, not after the way she had looked me in the eye and admitted she was leaving to be with someone else, but because I needed to understand. I needed to see the full picture of what my wife had become. The next morning, I got up earlier than usual. Lynette wasn't in bed. I found her in the kitchen, sipping coffee, scrolling through her phone like it was any other day. She didn't even look up when I walked in. I leaned against the counter, crossing my arms. "So, what's the plan for today? Gonna spend your last few days here pretending we're still a normal couple?" She set her phone down with an annoyed sigh. "Do we have to do this?" "Oh, absolutely," I said, my voice dripping with sarcasm. "You think you can just drop a bomb like that and expect me to pretend everything's fine?" She rubbed her temples, looking exhausted. "I just want us to end things peacefully. We don't have to fight." I barked out a laugh. "Peacefully? Lynette, you cheated on me. You planned your escape while still living under my roof, sleeping in my bed. And now you want me to help you pack your bags with a smile?" She looked away. "I knew you'd be like this." My hands curled into fists. "Like what? Angry? Betrayed?" She didn't answer. Instead, she grabbed her coffee and walked into the living room, like she could just ignore the reality of what she'd done. That's when it hit me. She wasn't ashamed. She wasn't even sorry. She was annoyed that I wasn't making this easy for her. I felt something inside me crack. All those years I had spent believing we were a team, that she was my partner, that we had built something real together. It was all a lie. And she was done pretending. I followed her into the living room, leaning against the doorway. "Tell me something," I said, my voice quieter now, controlled. "When did you decide I wasn't enough?" Lynette exhaled through her nose, setting her coffee down on the table. "It wasn't about that." "Oh, but it was," I countered. "Because at some point, you looked at me and thought, I can do better." She finally turned to face me, her expression unreadable. I stopped feeling alive with you." I blinked. "Alive?" She nodded, her voice softening, as if she actually expected me to understand. "You became predictable, comfortable. Everything was the same, our routines, our conversations, even the way you touched me. I needed more." A deep, bitter laugh rumbled from my chest. "So, you threw away 10 years because you got bored?" She flinched slightly, but didn't deny it. I shook my head, running a hand down my face. "Jesus, Lynette, you could have talked to me. We could have worked on it. But instead, you found someone new and decided to replace me." She bit her lip, her eyes flicking downward. "It just happened." I let out a humorless chuckle. "No, it didn't. People don't just accidentally cheat. You made a choice." She stayed silent. And that was all I needed to know. I stared at her for a long moment, taking in the stranger sitting across from me. The woman who had once been my best friend, my wife, my future, she was gone. This version of her, the one who saw me as nothing more than a stepping stone to her next adventure, wasn't someone I even recognized. Finally, I turned toward the hallway. "You want your freedom, Lynette?" I said over my shoulder. "Fine. But don't expect me to make it easy for you." She didn't ask what I meant. Maybe she thought I was bluffing. But she had no idea what was coming next. I left the house that morning without another word to Lynette. I needed air. Space. A moment to process the fact that my wife, the woman I had trusted above all else, had been lying to my face for months. Maybe longer. I drove aimlessly for a while, letting the streets blur past me. At some point, I pulled into a nearly empty parking lot outside a diner we used to go to when we first got married. It felt like another lifetime ago. Back when we couldn't get enough of each other. Back when I was enough for her. I sat in the car for a long time, staring at the neon, open sign flickering in the window. My stomach churned at the thought of food, but I went inside anyway. The place hadn't changed, same worn-out booths, same greasy scent of bacon and coffee. The waitress, an older woman with tired eyes, gave me a polite smile as she poured me a cup of coffee without asking. I took a sip, barely tasting it. My mind was elsewhere, running in circles, trying to make sense of everything. But the more I thought about it, the less sense it made. That's when it hit me. I didn't need to make sense of it. I had been torturing myself, trying to figure out why she did this, what I had done wrong, what had changed. But the truth was simple. She had made a choice. She had decided, somewhere along the way, that her happiness mattered more than our vows. More than me. And now she wanted me to just quietly accept it? To sign my name on those papers and let her walk away, guilt-free? No. I wasn't going to let her rewrite the story, painting herself as some victim of circumstance. She wanted freedom? She wanted a new life? Fine. But she would have to face the truth first. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through my contacts until I found the one person who might have some answers, Daniel. Daniel and I had known each other since college. He wasn't just a friend, he was practically family. He had been the best man at my wedding, the guy who always had my back. And yet, in the past few months, I had barely heard from him. It was odd at the time, but now? Now, it made me wonder. I hesitated for a second before hitting call. The phone rang 3 times before he picked up. "Hey, man," he said, his voice casual, almost hesitant. "Didn't expect to hear from you this early." I leaned back in the booth, gripping my coffee cup. "Yeah, well, things have been interesting." A pause. Then, "What's going on?" I took a deep breath, forcing my voice to stay even. Lynette told me everything. Silence. A beat too long. Then, a careful, everything? I clenched my jaw. There it is. My grip on the phone tightened. "So, you do know something." Another pause. Then he sighed. "Look, man, it's not my place to get involved." My blood ran cold. "You already are involved," I said, my voice dangerously calm. "So, do me a favor and tell me exactly how much you know before I start filling in the blanks myself." Daniel exhaled sharply. "It's not what you think." I let out a humorless laugh. "Oh, really? Because right now, I'm thinking my best friend has been keeping secrets from me. My wife's secrets." Another pause. "She told me about him a while ago," Daniel admitted. "She swore me to secrecy. Said she wasn't happy and didn't know how to tell you. I told her she was making a mistake, man. I told her." I felt something inside me snap. Not from anger. Anger would have been easier. This was something worse. A deep, hollow realization that the people closest to me had been watching my marriage fall apart and hadn't said a damn word. "Who is he?" I asked, my voice flat. Daniel hesitated again. "Daniel." He sighed. "His name is Evan." Evan. The name meant nothing to me. And yet, it meant everything. I set my coffee down, my hand shaking slightly. "How long?" "A few months," he said quietly. "I don't know the exact timeline, but long enough. Long enough. Long enough for her to destroy everything we built together. Long enough for my so-called friend to know and do nothing." I let out a slow breath, gripping the edge of the table to ground myself. "And you never thought to tell me?" Daniel's voice was laced with regret. "It wasn't my place." I scoffed. "Not your place? I was your best friend. And you let me walk around like an idiot while my wife was—" I stopped myself before I said something I couldn't take back. Daniel sighed again. "I'm sorry, man. I really am. But sorry wasn't enough. Not anymore." I ended the call without another word. I sat there for a long time, staring at my reflection in the diner window. The man looking back at me wasn't the same person who had walked in here an hour ago. That man had still been clinging to the idea that maybe, just maybe, this was some mistake. But now I knew the truth. And I wasn't going to let Lynette walk away unscathed. I sat in my car outside the diner for a long time, gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. The conversation with Daniel replayed in my head over and over, each repetition making my stomach churn with a different kind of nausea. So many things suddenly made sense. The late-night work meetings, the sudden disinterest in our routine, the way Lynette had started dressing up more often, even when she had nowhere special to go. But the part that cut the deepest wasn't the betrayal itself. It was that so many people had known, and no one had told me. Daniel had known. My so-called best friend had sat across from me at barbecues, laughed at my dumb jokes, listened to me talk about my wife, all while keeping her secret. And Evan, whoever the hell he was, he had been living in my blind spot, quietly dismantling my marriage while I walked around oblivious. I needed to see him. I didn't know what I'd do when I found him. Maybe I wanted to put a face to the wreckage. Maybe I wanted answers. Maybe I just wanted confirmation that this wasn't some nightmare I'd eventually wake up from. So I did what any rational, completely sane husband would do. I started digging. I drove home, walked straight past Lynette without acknowledging her, and locked myself in the office. My heart was pounding, but my hands were steady as I sat down at my desk and pulled up my laptop. I started with the most obvious route, her phone records. It didn't take long to find the name Evan buried under an innocent alias, office supplies. I let out a short, bitter laugh. Of course. My wife had been sneaking around behind my back, and I had been too trusting, too stupid to question it. I kept digging. A quick search of Evan's number led me to social media. And that's when I saw him. He wasn't what I expected. No movie villain smirk. No towering, intimidating presence. Just a guy, an ordinary guy, grinning in a profile picture with his arm draped around a golden retriever. His bio was something nauseatingly generic about loving the outdoors and enjoying good company. I clicked through his photos, each one making me sicker. There was a picture of him at a company holiday party, one that Lynette had attended. Another of him hiking, with a caption about how nature clears the mind. A post from just 2 days ago, grateful for new beginnings. I slammed the laptop shut so hard the screen flickered. New beginnings. Lynette had already moved on. In her mind, I was just a technicality, some paperwork she had to sign before she could be free. A sharp knock on the office door jolted me from my thoughts. Lynette's voice followed, hesitant. Can we talk? I didn't answer immediately. I took a deep breath, forcing my hands to unclench. Then I stood, walked to the door, and opened it. She looked up at me with an unreadable expression, arms crossed over her chest. You're mad. I let out a dry chuckle. Mad? No. Mad was yesterday. Today, I'm just done. She exhaled, rubbing her forehead. I didn't want this to be ugly. Ugly, I repeated, leaning against the doorframe. Lynette, you cheated on me. You made a choice, and you had every opportunity to tell me the truth before it got to this point. And now you want clean and simple. She flinched. It wasn't like that. I tilted my head. Really? Because from where I'm standing, it sure looks like you lied to my face for months, lined up your next relationship, and then dropped this on me like a business transaction. She looked away. I didn't plan it this way. I folded my arms. But you did plan it. Silence. I stepped closer, lowering my voice. You know what the worst part is? You weren't even going to tell me. You were just going to leave, let me sign those papers like a clueless idiot while you walked off into your new beginning. Her throat bobbed as she swallowed. I didn't want to hurt you. I laughed, shaking my head. You did hurt me, Lynette. And the fact that you don't even realize how much? That's what makes this so much worse. She shifted uncomfortably, glancing down the hallway, like she was searching for an escape. I studied her for a moment. You love him. Her eyes snapped back to mine. She hesitated, just for a fraction of a second. But it was enough. My stomach twisted, but my face stayed blank. That's all I needed to know, I said quietly. I turned away, heading back into the office, but her voice stopped me. Where does this leave us? She asked. I paused in the doorway. It leaves you with exactly what you wanted, I said, my voice even. And it leaves me making damn sure you don't get to rewrite the past. I shut the door behind me. Because if she thought I was just going to disappear quietly, she had another thing coming. The house was quiet again. But it wasn't the kind of quiet I used to find comforting, the peaceful silence of a home filled with familiarity. No, this silence was heavy. Thick with unspoken words, with the weight of something rotting between us. I sat alone in the living room, staring at nothing in particular. The glow from a lamp in the corner cast long shadows across the walls, stretching and twisting like ghosts of the past 10 years. I could hear Lynette moving around in the bedroom, the occasional sound of drawers opening and closing. She was packing. Packing. She had been so sure of herself when she dropped the news. So calm, so prepared. But now? Now she was unraveling. I knew because she had checked her phone at least 15 times since our last conversation. She thought I hadn't noticed, but I did. She was waiting. Not for me. Not for some reconciliation. She was waiting for him. Evan. That name felt like a splinter lodged under my skin. I hadn't even met the guy, but he had already taken so much from me. My wife. My marriage. My sense of reality. And yet, I wasn't as angry at him as I was at her. Because Evan? He didn't make vows to me. He didn't promise to be my partner in life. To choose me every day, even when things got hard. That was her. And she had thrown it all away for some thrill, for something new. I wasn't stupid. I knew marriages changed over time. That the butterflies from the early days didn't last forever. But I had always thought that what we had was deeper than that. That even when things got mundane, we would work on it. Together. Apparently, I had been the only one who believed that. I ran a hand down my face, trying to force myself to feel something other than this dull, crushing weight in my chest. But nothing came. I was just empty. Then I heard it. Her voice. Soft. Muffled. Coming from the bedroom. I stood slowly, my body moving before my brain had fully registered why. She was on the phone. I moved closer, my bare feet silent against the hardwood. The door was slightly open, and I could see her standing there, her back to me, clutching the phone to her ear. "I don't know," she whispered. A pause. "It's just harder than I thought." My fingers curled into fists. Another pause. Then she let out a shaky sigh. "I know. Yes. I will." I didn't need to hear the other side of the conversation to know who it was. Evan. I could have walked in right then, confronted her, let her know that I had caught her again, sneaking around, lying. But I didn't. Instead, I turned away, because in that moment, I realized something. She wasn't mine anymore. The woman in that room, whispering into the phone like a nervous teenager, wasn't the woman I had married. That woman was gone. Maybe she had been gone for a long time, and I had just refused to see it. And if she thought I was going to make this easy for her, she had severely underestimated me. I walked back to the living room, grabbed my laptop, and opened the email draft I had started earlier. If Lynette wanted a clean exit, she wasn't going to get it. Because some things deserve to be seen. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in the living room, staring at the ceiling, feeling the weight of 10 years pressing down on me. But it wasn't the kind of weight that crushed me. It was the kind that made me realize something. I wasn't broken. Not really. I had spent so much time trying to understand why Lynette did this, how she could throw away everything we had built together. But in the end, the answer didn't matter. She had made her choice. And now, it was time for me to make mine. By the time the sun rose, my mind was clear. I heard Lynette moving around upstairs, finishing her packing. I didn't go to her. I didn't need to. Instead, I made coffee, sat at the kitchen table, and waited. It wasn't long before she walked in, rolling her suitcase behind her. She hesitated when she saw me, like she expected a fight. Maybe a last-minute plea. She was going to be disappointed. "I'll send someone for the rest of my stuff," she said, her voice carefully neutral. I nodded. "Fine." She looked at me for a moment, as if searching for something. Regret? Sadness? Maybe she wanted to see me suffer, to know that she still had some kind of hold over me. But she didn't. "Goodbye, then," she said, adjusting the strap of her purse. I took a sip of my coffee, not bothering to stand. "Good luck, Lynette." She lingered for a second longer, then turned and walked out the door. And just like that, she was gone. I expected to feel something. Sadness, relief, anger. But as I sat there, staring at the empty space where she had just been, I realized the only thing I felt was light. It was over. No more lies. No more waiting for answers that wouldn't change anything. I had spent so long believing that my happiness was tied to this marriage, to her. But the truth was, I had been holding on to something that had already ended long before she admitted it. I wasn't a victim. I wasn't broken. I was free. I grabbed my phone and scrolled through my contacts, landing on a name I hadn't called in a while. Someone who had always been there, even when I had been too caught up in my failing marriage to notice. I hit call. "Hey," I said when they picked up, a small smile forming on my lips for the first time in weeks. "You up for lunch? I think it's time I start moving forward." Because I wasn't looking back. Not anymore.